So this is a perfect opportunity to talk about how to program the tally system to say what is supposed to be red and green. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back into Engineering Setup. We're going to go down to the bottom button here called Router Tally Router. Now, you're probably saying, I don't have a router on my switcher, but that's okay. The switcher lives in what's called a virtual space, and we have to set the source and destination coordinates of this virtual space in order to make tally work properly. It's not necessary to completely understand it, we just have to set it right. So we need to make sure that in this row here where it says switcher 1 matrix size, we need to make sure that the matrix size is set to 136 by 138, and when it says standard. And we need to make sure that the source and the destination and the level are all set to 1. To do that, we're going to press the switcher 1 button. And notice over here we've got 3 knobs. Hit the source knob, make sure it's set to 1. Hit the destination, make sure it's set to 1. The level, and make sure it's set to 1. And that will program the switcher to live in a certain virtual space and allow the tallies to operate. So now that we've programmed which outputs the tally should look at, and we've told the switcher where it lives in the virtual space, let's go and actually look at the tally system and what the inputs are going to do with that. So we're going to go over here to Panel, Device Interface, Tally GPI Output Config. Now again, this looks like one of those, oh my goodness, complicated menus, but it really isn't. The left-hand side is simply setting what 2 pins are together, or port number, on the multi-pin connector on the back of the switcher chassis. The right side are all the inputs. So P1 means input 1, P2 means input 2, etc., etc. As it comes from the factory, they are all set 1 to 1, meaning that port number 1 on the back of the chassis is automatically set to input number 1. Port 2 is set to input 2, port 3, input 3, and so on and so on and so on. Now, tally and router systems can be very complicated to program, and there's probably entire manuals written just for that. We're just going to do the basics here. So the first basic is going to be what's called a tally enable. Tally enable basically says to the system, look at this output, and if it's on this output, make this kind of tally happen. So let me explain what I just meant by that. So if we go to the top one here, we can see there's an enable number and a destination output. Output 3 is looking for tally type R1. So remember before we set R1, this is red tally group 1. Under the enable column, it's enabled, and input 1 to 1 doesn't really matter right now. But let's figure out what this is. So first of all, we have to look up what is output 3, because it sounds to me like it's saying output 3 is program. Well, if we go back to switcher, output, and look at output 3, sure enough, output 3 is set to program preview program 1, or program. So if we come back here, this line is saying, look at output 3 and fire the red tally for whatever is on output 3. In plain English, whatever is on output 3 and I'm changing it, that's what's going to cause a red tally. And you can see that again happening on our multi-viewer here on the bottom. So if I want to change this, let's say program is no longer on output 3, it's on output 10. I'm going to hit the Modify button, and the one thing I'm going to change here is the destination address. Leave destination level alone at number 1, leave tally type 1 alone, that's R1. Hit destination address, and we're going to change that to 10, which again corresponds to the output number. Hit Execute. So now it's looking at output 10 instead of output 3 for the tally. And take a look at the multi-viewer. My red is gone because there's nothing on output 10 that's showing up on the multi-viewer. If I go back again and set this back to output 3 and hit Execute, give it a couple of seconds, and my red tallies are back as they always were. Now the same happens with green tally. Output 9, again, if we come back over here and look at output 9, it's program preset preview. So if we change that, all we'd have to do is come into output 9, modify it, change the destination address to something else, and my green tally will go away. By the way, if you don't want a green tally at all, simply delete the line. So we're going to go over here and we're going to say delete. Now it's not looking for a different output for green tally. Green tally doesn't exist anymore on the system. Now if I want to add my green tally back, I'm going to hit New. I'm going to set the destination address to 9, which was the output for preview. On the tally enable portion over here, we need to change that to enable and not tally input. And very important, on the tally type, I need to change that to type 2, which up here now says green 1. Hit execute, and a couple of seconds, my green tally is now back. So I now have program and preview tallies. So other than the built-in tally that's part of the multi-viewer, there are two other tally systems that go to the outside world: parallel tally and serial tally. So what parallel tally is basically relay closures on the back of the switcher. That's what you'd use to possibly hook up to the camera tally light, to the CCU, so that when the switcher closes the relay, that it makes the camera see that and light the light. So we're going to go to parallel tally down here on the bottom. And again, this looks very complicated. We're only going to touch on a couple of things here. Here on the left-hand side, you can see I have 48 parallel tally ports. However, they're all set to red tally, which is the first one that we had set back in our tally menu. However, what if I want to monitor something for green tally? So if I came over here and on the right-hand side selected green tally for source 1 and maybe came down here to pin 26, I could set that now. Go over here, set green tally for here, set green tally for there, and set green tally for here. So now on ports 26, 27, 28, and 29, those will output when that source is in preview as opposed to on program, which they would do for 1, 2, 3, and 4. Lastly, let's take a look at setting up serial tally. Now, serial tally is one 9-pin connector on the back of the chassis, and it's used for things like a big monitor wall or when you have a router connected to the switcher. And it's far more efficient and easy than having a whole bunch of wires coming out of the switcher with relay closures. So to go to serial tally, we're going to go back to the router tally menu. On the very bottom on the right-hand side, we're going to select serial tally. Now, it's very important. We want to set this port on serial tally port to panel port. We want to make sure that the tally group is set to 1 through 4 and that the tally data size is set to 128 bits. Lastly, we want to turn on R1 and G1 for the panel port.